Welcome! Today we're going to trace the origins of some of the world's most enduring traditions by looking at the foundational stories that shaped them. You see, this isn't just about ancient history. It's about the moral choices made at the dawn of time and how their echoes, believe it or not, still reach us today. So let's start that journey.
This quote really sets the stage, doesn't it? We are going all the way back to the very first breath of humanity to try and understand the structure of the world that came after. These aren't just myths. You can think of them as the original case studies in human decision-making. So where do we start? Well, right at the beginning. Our first chapter, creation. We're going to explore the story of what's described as a perfect world and the single critical choice that would change the course of human history forever. I mean, just try to picture a world with no fear, no shame, no guilt. The source material describes this initial state as one of just total purity, a time when humanity was in direct, daily communication with the divine. It was a reality defined entirely by innocence and peace. Now, this is where things get really fascinating. Look at the stark contrast here. A single choice, just one act of disobedience, and the entire human condition was fractured. Innocence, it gives way to fear. Purity is suddenly replaced by shame. And that open, honest dialogue, it just devolves into blame, with Adam blaming Eve and Eve blaming the serpent. And the fallout, wow, it was immediate and absolutely catastrophic. The very first children born outside that garden, Cain and Abel, they carried this new, broken nature. A simple act of jealousy over an accepted sacrifice boils over into the first murder. That first moral failure in the garden had now cascaded into the first act of human-on-human violence. So as the generations passed, the sources describe this corruption just spreading like wildfire until the entire world was consumed by wickedness. This decline sets the stage for what you could call a divine reset, a global cataclysm, and a story that really hinges on the personal struggle and the unwavering faith of just one man.
Just look at that number, 120 years. That represents the sheer scale of Noah's task. For a century and 2 decades, he labored to build this massive ark. And he wasn't in a shipyard. He didn't have a team of believers helping him. No, he was in a world that had completely turned its back on his beliefs, a world just filled with ridicule.
I mean, can you imagine? This was the question Noah must have faced every single day. And it so brilliantly illustrates his personal struggle. He was building for a future nobody else could see, based entirely on a promise he'd heard. It was just an incredible act of faith in the face of, well, universal skepticism.
And just as he was told, the flood came. It was a cataclysmic judgment, basically wiping the slate clean. And yet, inside this massive act of destruction was an act of mercy. 8 people saved. And it all concludes with a promise, symbolized by the rainbow, that the world would never again be destroyed by water. Okay, so from this huge planet-wide event, our story now zooms way in. We're shifting focus to the intimate story of one man, Abraham, whose personal faith was destined to become the very bedrock of an entire nation. Seriously, just pause and think about this for a second. At 75, an age when most people are settled, content, Abraham was called to abandon his home, his family, his entire culture, and just walk into the unknown. His only guide was a divine promise. The level of personal sacrifice and trust required here is just immense.
And this is so important. His very identity was changed to reflect this promise. His name literally shifted from Abram, meaning exalted father, to Abraham, which means father of a multitude. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a living, breathing declaration of a future he couldn't yet see, a future filled with countless descendants. But then comes the ultimate test of his faith, the son he had waited 25 years for, the very child through whom the whole promise was supposed to be fulfilled. He was now commanded to sacrifice. I mean, this command seemed to fly in the face of his entire life's journey. And at the very last moment, with the knife literally raised, a divine intervention stopped him. You see, it wasn't a test of cruelty. It was a test of ultimate priority and trust. His willingness to obey affirmed his faith, and thankfully, his son was spared. So the story of Abraham's family keeps going, and with it, this theme of personal struggle. Now we turn to one of his great-grandsons, a man named Joseph. And here, the internal family dynamics of jealousy and favoritism, they just spiral into this remarkable story of betrayal, suffering, and ultimately incredible triumph. I mean, Joseph's life is just an absolute roller coaster of highs and lows. He's the favorite son, then he's betrayed by his own jealous brothers, sold into slavery, and then, to top it all off, he's unjustly thrown into prison. And yet, it's from the very depths of that prison that he rises to become the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. And this quote right here, it perfectly sums up his entire perspective. These are Joseph's own words to his brothers years later. He completely reframes their malicious act, not as a personal tragedy for him, but as part of a much larger plan to save his family and the entire region from a devastating famine. All right, so the story is expanding once more. We're zooming back out from one family to an entire nation. That promise made centuries ago to Abraham is about to be fulfilled. But, well, it's going to require a dramatic, epic struggle for liberation. So the promise of a great nation had come true. Abraham's family had grown to a population of millions. But there was a huge catch. They weren't in their own land. They were enslaved, suffering under the harsh rule of a new pharaoh who saw their growing numbers as a threat. So after a series of 10 devastating plagues forces Pharaoh to let them go, he changes his mind. And the Israelites find themselves in an absolutely impossible position. They are trapped between the impassable Red Sea and the charging chariots of the most powerful army on earth. It's a moment of just absolute, total despair. Okay, this comparison is just fantastic. Let's break it down. Way back with Noah, salvation came in the form of an ark, a wooden vessel to protect a single family from the water. But here, salvation for a nation of millions comes as a miraculous path through the water. You can see how the scale of the intervention has grown right alongside the people. And just like that, the impossible happened. The sea parted, and 2 million people walked across on dry ground. It's such a powerful, simple statement for one of the most dramatic rescues ever told, and it really solidifies their identity as a people who have been set free. But you know, getting free is one thing. Freedom brought new choices. After receiving their laws, they reached the very border of the promised land. But a collective failure of nerve, a choice based on fear instead of faith, led to a really harsh consequence. 40 years of wandering in the desert, until that entire generation that refused to trust had passed away. Even Moses, their leader, paid the price for a moment of disobedience and was only allowed to see the land from a distance. So, when you boil it all down, what are we left with? When you strip these epic stories down to their core, you find individuals standing at a crossroads. Noah chose faith over ridicule. Abraham chose obedience over his own heart. Joseph chose forgiveness over revenge. And their individual choices had world-shaping consequences. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Are the fundamental choices we face today between trust and doubt, sacrifice and self-interest, really any different?